Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Josh Guerrero, and I'm the host and founder of this podcast, which is simply titled The All Around Adventure Podcast. Whether you're joining me for the first time or if you've been listening for a while now, I certainly do want to welcome you here. And I also want to thank you for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on. There's also a lot of amazing podcasts out there that you could also be listening to. But the fact that you've chosen to download and listen to mine, I greatly appreciate it, and I certainly don't take it for granted. Now, if you are new to this podcast and you're not entirely sure what we're all about here, this is the show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. And that's done through 3 different shows on this podcast now. I got my regular show, which is an interview show. I also have my Wisdom Wednesday segment every single Wednesday. And I have this solo cast that you just so happen to be listening to right now. And this is the blog readings, or TBR for short, which it's exactly how it sounds, where I just read my blog posts, both past and present, for you to have an audio format on the go. Now today on the blog readings, I'm actually going to be reading a blog post that I wrote a couple years back, and I thought about this particular post recently when I was interviewed by Michael Bullock, who is the host of the Man of Mastery podcast. I did an interview with him earlier this week, and actually that episode's going to be released tomorrow. I just got word of that, so be on the lookout for that, and I'll leave a link in the show notes for this episode when it does. But I told him a little bit about my time in the Gambia when I was serving in Peace Corps. And there's a lot of things that went on during my time there, and a lot of challenges. And a particular challenging situation that I faced is one that I'm going to be talking about in this episode of the blog readings. And it's, of course, the blog post that I'm going to be reading today. And I titled this post, Fire in the Night in Baja, Kunda, the Gambia. And I'm sure that probably creates a little bit of foreshadowing, but I just want to go ahead and get right into this so you can hear the story. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the life lessons that I've taken away from this experience in the outro for this episode. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into today's episode of the blog readings. Who doesn't like sitting around the campfire with loved ones, or blowing out the candles on a birthday cake, or grilling up some backyard barbecue? When controlled properly, fire has its positive uses, but also has its destructive capabilities, so we try to be as careful as possible. Though at times things can spiral out of control, and fire can spread quickly. This was the case one night in the village that I lived in during my Peace Corps service, a night that turned out to be another one of my misadventures. I had just finished bathing and was getting ready to settle into bed. I saw a light from a fire that was somewhere in the village. At first, I didn't think much of it because it wasn't uncommon for some of the villagers to have large fires and do singing and dancing. But I then noticed that the light started to get brighter, and people weren't singing, they were screaming and crying. At that point, I realized that something was very wrong, so I put on my shoes and sprang into action. As soon as I left my house, I noticed that my host mother was crying and filling up a large bowl with sand from the ground. She was 7 months pregnant at the time and was gearing up to go help fight the fire. I knew that I couldn't let her go and risk herself and my soon-to-be baby host sister, so I walked in front of her and said, "Ma, hani, tau, umdema," which in Sarahule means, "Mother, no, sit down, I will help." She nodded her head and sat down on the porch. That assured me that she wasn't going to leave. So I then started making my way towards the fire. I walked through the narrow back street near my compound. There were a lot of people carrying furniture and other items out of one of the compounds that was near the fire. I continued walking and came to the street that had the building that was on fire. People were standing off to the side watching the spectacle in front of them, while others ran towards the building with bowls full of sand or water to try to extinguish the fire. That's when I realized the harsh reality of the situation. We were out in the middle of nowhere, and no fire trucks were going to come to our aid. We were on our own. I started to help and found myself in a chaotic mess. Everyone was in a frenzy, and people were bumping into each other and sometimes dropping bowls of sand and water. I tried to think of ways to organize things and fight the fire more effectively. At this point, I still wasn't very good at speaking Sarahule, but somehow I was able to get people to form a line so that way bowls of sand and water could be passed up to people positioned on the rooftops, as they were in a better position over the fire. Those who were on the rooftops tossed the empty bowls into the street, forming a pile. I ran over and started to collect them so they could be reused. I became very frustrated because there were all of these empty bowls and so many people were just standing around and watching. I went up to a random villager who appeared able-bodied and handed him a bowl while sternly saying, "Dore sasa," which in Sarahule means sand, now. He gave me a quick look of confusion, but then grabbed the bowl and took off. I was able to pass off the other bowls that I had as well. We were able to get the fire under control after about an hour and a half. At that point, people started to return to their homes. When I made it back to my compound, I asked my host mother for some water so I could bathe again. Fighting the fire left me covered with sand. She brought me a large container of water and then said something to me while pointing at my arm. Blood was trickling down my arm from a cut on my shoulder. I wasn't sure how it happened, but it wasn't too bad. After bathing yet again and bandaging my arm, I laid down on my bed. I was feeling exhausted as the bits of adrenaline wore off. But I had a hard time sleeping because so many thoughts ran through my head. I was worried that some people might have gotten hurt, or that a family just lost their home. But I had no way of knowing for sure, and that bothered me. The next morning I helped move the furniture back into that compound. After that I met up with one of the village elders to find out more about what had happened. He told me that a family was cooking dinner and their gas stove went haywire, and before they knew it, the fire was taking their house. But the good news was that no one was hurt. He thanked me for helping out and told me that other people became motivated to help as well after they saw me working. I hope you enjoyed this story, yet another misadventure from my time abroad. This should go without saying, please be safe with fire. If you like this post, then please share it. Also, got a misadventure story? If so, leave a comment below and tell me about it. Thank you for visiting my blog. Have a great day. Well, there you have it, everyone. Another episode of the blog readings is in the books. I hope you enjoyed today's reading and you found it interesting. And just looking back on this experience that I had in the Gambia, as well as the other challenges that I faced while I was living there, is that I've just become very grateful, and gratitude is something that I practice regularly now that I'm living back here at home in the U.S. Because if I have an emergency here, for instance, if we're talking about a fire is trying to burn my home, I could just dial 911 and I could have a fire engine come screaming over the next hill to try and help me out. But unfortunately, in this case, in other parts of the world, some people don't have that luxury and they got to get resourceful and try to manage these crises themselves. So yeah, it's something I just become very grateful for from having experiences like this. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please hit the subscribe button wherever you might be listening to this podcast. I have a couple episodes dropping every single week, so hit that subscribe button so that way you don't miss a single episode. Also, I've had over 100 podcast episodes released so far, none of which you've had to pay for. I mean, this podcast is completely free for you, but the only thing I'll ask is that you head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Just might take you about 2 to 3 minutes, but those ratings and reviews will go such a long way to getting the word out about this podcast, so that way more people can find it and get some value from it as well. Also, this podcast is just one of a few free resources that we offer at All Around Adventure. Another free resource that we have is our private Facebook group called Travel Titans. It's a group that was created for travelers to share their stories, their tips and advice, as well as their inspiration pertaining to both travel and self-development. And if you think that's something that you'd like to be a part of, we certainly welcome you to join us. And you can join us at facebook.com/groups/Travel Titans. And we look forward to seeing you there. And the last thing that I'd like to share before I close out here, again, I just want to thank you for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on. There's also a lot of other podcasts that you could be listening to right now. But the fact that you decided to download and listen to this one, I greatly appreciate it. It just means the world to me, and I certainly don't take it for granted. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. And that's all I have to say for now, and I'll be back on Wednesday with your Wisdom Wednesday segment, so be sure to check back in then. And I also have a fantastic guest joining me next Saturday, so be on the lookout for that as well. And until next time, I'm Josh Guerrero saying be safe, happy travels, and always move forward.